Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, as Republicans get ready for their national convention in Cleveland, controversy continues around the presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. What does the vicious gang killing in Silver Spring mean for Montgomery County? And as the state of Maryland prepares to issue licenses to growers of medical marijuana, a new and troubling report is released on the escalating use of heroin in the state and across the country. Are our drug laws at odds with one another? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by past president of the Progressive Maryland, ELBRIDGE James, former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Unkefer, Republican activist Jerry Cave, and consultant and business strategist Rich Parsons. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. While Democrats blithely celebrate the non-indictment of their presumed candidate Hillary Clinton, declaring the violation of national security in their rearview mirror, Republican angst over their nominee, Donald Trump, continues. With the convention set to start on Monday, as late as this week, there was a move to allow GOP delegates to vote their conscience rather than be bound to vote for Donald Trump, who won the majority of delegates in the various state primaries and caucuses. Mark, the Convention Rules Committee defeated a key proposal to amend party rules that could have paved the way for delegates to oppose Trump's nomination on the convention floor. With this inter-party insurgency to block Trump's nomination from receiving the Republican nomination being defeated, it appears that the Stop Trump movement has run its course. But can your candidate unite the party behind him, or does it really matter?
Actually, it's interesting. Both parties, if you look at the numbers that came out this week, have pretty much unified behind their nominee. Both are running at about 79–80% supporting the nominee. The interesting question is where the independents are right now, and that's really the category that's more up for grabs.
Well, but I think you're dismissing this too casually. I mean, the fact is that there are a lot of mainstream Republican delegates who are not happy and not united behind this nominee, and the question is whether they will get on board after Cleveland.
I think by and large they will, and again, the polling data shows that the party overwhelmingly is in support. There is some challenge, but then frankly there's also challenge in the Democratic Party unity. Both are at about an 80% level in terms. If you look at, for example, the CBS New York Times poll that came out this week, there's rough equivalency in the number that have started. Again, it's independence that really is the key to this election.
Well, Jerry, your man Trump has said that he doesn't care if those mainstream Republicans, whom he views as Washington elites, support him. So can he possibly win if he alienates so many of the party faithful?
He's going to win, and Hillary Clinton did a lot of help last week to help us unite the party, because some of the people that were wavering on Trump were so offended by the fact that Comey outlined how she's guilty and then decided not to recommend an indictment, that really solidified a lot behind Trump too. So thank you for that. And the other thing is that Trump is going to win the election, and people are behind him. And the people that you're talking about, the Washington elites, when they don't support Trump, that helps Trump, because the people know they've been screwed over. That's why Bernie Sanders had a lot of support. That's why Trump has a lot of support. And when those people speak out against Trump, it helps Trump.
Well, Rich, I'm going to ask you to respond to Jerry on this, because I think there's a great deal of dissatisfaction.
Well, I'm going to respond to Mark too, because
in the Republican Party.
Right. I don't know what polls Mark was looking at. Maybe one or two show them about the same, but notice he said about the same. Hillary Clinton has actually consolidated more of the Democratic support, including the huge majority of Bernie Sanders voters, than Donald Trump has been able to support.
But the question is,
a huge split in the Republican Party.
Will the Republicans unite?
They don't seem to have any chance of winning over the former presidents, who are not going to be speaking at the convention. A lot of the small business owners and the Chamber of Commerce folks who are extremely alarmed at the protectionist messaging from this candidate and this wing of the Republican Party, which is diametrically opposed to decades of Republican policies over the years. There's a deeply divided Republican Party, and you could try to paper over it as much as you want, but they're far more divided going into this convention season than the Democrats this year. I can say for a change.
Here's the other number. Again,
you can respond, and I want to go to Elbridge.
The poll that I referred to was CBS, New York Times this week, which shows the parties coming together. And the interesting number in that was that Hillary was getting 22% of independents, and Gary Johnson was getting 21%.
But Mark,
Mark,
can he win if your mainstream Republicans don't go to the, hold on, Jerry, hold on. If the mainstream Republicans don't go out and vote, can he possibly win?
Well, you have yes, he can.
I got to go to Elbridge. Elbridge.
The first thing at the convention, there'll be one where mainstream Republicans, the elite Republicans who find they have no base of support to do any action, if they were contrary to that, will hold their nose and be polite in front of the cameras, and he will get the coronation that he is demanding and keeping the base. They need to keep the base happy. If the base are the uneducated,
but the base is not enough to win a general election.
No, we're talking about the convention.
Clean math.
We're talking about the convention.
I want to go back to Rich. Rich, this week it was announced, or today it was announced that Indiana Governor Mike Pence will be selected as Trump's running mate. Doesn't that bring in the mainstream back to the Republican ticket?
Some of it yes, but some of it no. If you run the math and you look at the base of the Republican Party today and you look at the base of the Democratic Party, one of those two things is actually much bigger than the other. Right now, a lot more Americans are identifying as Democrats than Republicans. So the base of the Democratic Party is larger than the base of the Republican Party. If they split independents evenly, Hillary Clinton's still going to be president. But here's the thing about Pence. Pence helps them with some of the evangelical conservatives because Pence is one of them. He is not a moderate. He's not going to help at all to broaden the tent, which was all the rage after the last electoral failure by the Republican Party. There's all this talk about reaching out to minority voters and young voters and lesbians, gays. All that has gone out the window, and Mike Pence is not anybody who can help them with that problem.
I want to go to Elbridge because Rich kind of stumbled on part of the truth there.
Yeah,
veteran Republican campaign strategists believe the key part of Trump's strategy is to ensure high turnout of white working class Republicans and also white working class Democrats. Can he do it?
He can do it if the Democrats stumble over themselves and allow him to take what is our natural base. The problem we had, when Dukakis ran for office, is that the Democratic base did not turn out. And in fact, we had candidates that fumbled and stumbled over the whole election process. It depends on the Democrats how Trump works it.
Jerry, you've been dying to get in here.
I don't know why you're taking any opinion from Rich and Elbridge, Democrats, about what's going to happen with Republicans. They have not got a clue. When Republicans go into that booth, they have, as you said before, a binary choice. They can either vote to have Hillary Clinton, who's going to stack the Supreme Court, who's going to make illegals legal citizens, and who's going to continue the horrible policies, the economic policies that don't even keep up with growth, or they're going to vote for a guy that they don't like his style. I'm going to tell you something, they're going to do that. And all this stuff about independence, that doesn't happen till the last couple weeks, because the reason they're independents is they don't pay attention to it until the end. So all this conversation about the independence, this and that, you have no idea.
Independents are independents because they don't like some of the behavior of either party.
And exactly
they don't care.
And they're
They
actually,
do pay
the
attention.
independents are
Not till
critical
the
to
end.
this election because, frankly, both nominees are held in low esteem. They're with high unfavorables. Yes, Donald Trump, but also Hillary. Hillary is unifying Republicans. A different Democratic nominee probably could have taken more Republican votes, but because she's such a divisive figure who with such high, again, as high unfavorables as Trump within about 3 or 4 percentage points, the Republican base is supporting
Let me go back to the most important thing said by the Clintons. It's the economy, stupid. And Hillary offers no solution to that, and Donald Trump does. And that's why he's going to get more votes from Democrats and
anyone who agrees with what you just
white
said.
people and people of color because
Donald
they
Trump's
care about their
offering
jobs
nothing
and
for
their
solutions
families.
for this economy.
You mean the guy
and the
who's been
economy is
sued by
actually
more people?
doing pretty well. But you know, a lot of this does go to what Elbridge said. You know, Hillary Clinton is going to have to perform the way
Hillary
she
Clinton
can perform.
hasn't even had a press conference all
she
year.
has had the worst couple of weeks of PR you could possibly have,
And
and
that
she's
hasn't
still
even
beating
shown up
Trump.
in
That
the-
should
in the
tell you
polls
something.
yet.
That is in the last round of polls.
Well,
and
aren't
she's
you,
still winning.
aren't you concerned by the Quinnipiac poll?
No, I'm not.
That,
One
that shows
poll.
that shows that Trump is leading in very
What I look
important
at,
battleground
Casey,
states.
what I look at, Casey, is the averages of polls that some of the what is it, the 930 or the Nate Silver's group at the New York Times, and the moving averages of the polls are what you should look at. One poll can have an undersample and be thrown off pretty significantly. So you look at the moving averages. The averages show Hillary consistently winning in all of those swing states.
It's way too
It's
early
close,
to talk about this stuff.
but
You've got
she's
the
winning.
conventions. You've got a lot that's going to happen. You've got a lot of domestic violence that's going to happen. You've got a lot of terrorism that's going to happen, and that's going to affect the polling too.
You can also have Donald Trump saying some of the stupidest
Yes,
things in the world.
he's going to continue
That's
being
gonna
Donald
happen.
Trump, and that's going to affect the polling.
When Nixon won in '68 and when Reagan won in '80, it was because there was a coalition of middle-class voters in the Rust Bucket states that voted for the Republican nominee because they felt the Democratic Party had abandoned them.
Right. That's
Isn't
what's
that
happened
it?
this time.
And that is the vein
And I think
that
what you're
Trump
gonna
is
see,
mining right
he's
now.
gonna
He's been
try to
running
mine
that
that.
since the beginning.
I think the numbers for that strategy are not there and weren't even there last election. And B, there's
Look at Pennsylvania.
Wait a minute,
there's no reason why
all right.
disaffected white
We have to
low-income
go
voters
to-
should vote for this
all right, we have to go
billionaire
to break.
playboy.
We got to go to a
So-
break. So panel, as we go to break, at the end of the Republican convention, will Donald Trump be the nominee? And does he have a chance to win in November? Mark,
He'll be the nominee, and he has a chance, but I have to say he's the underdog.
Elbridge,
Ditto. Same thing. He's the underdog, but he will be the nominee.
Rich,
He will be the nominee. He has a chance, but it's likely he will lose in November.
and Jerry, you get to have the final word.
It's really easy. They're half right and totally wrong. He's going to be our next president.
When we come back from this short break, as heroin use increases to epidemic levels in Maryland, should the state license medical marijuana growers? And does the horrific gang killing in Silver Spring indicate about safety in Montgomery County? Stay tuned. And welcome back. This week we learned of the horrific slaying of a Silver Spring teenager by members of the violent Hispanic street gang MS-13. According to Montgomery County Police, 16-year-old Christian Morales died after he was stabbed more than 40 times by 4 gang assailants. And in the aftermath, officials commented that the county is seeing an unprecedented level of gang-related homicides. MS-13, according to officials, is an international criminal gang that originated in Los Angeles and has been described as the most violently dangerous gang in the United States. But more particularly troubling to some is that many of the recent recruits for the gang may come from the many unaccompanied youth from El Salvador that have been resettled in Montgomery County over the past 2 years. In a report to the County Council last month, police said that 4,500 youths, 2/3 of them boys, have been resettled in Montgomery County because of the surge from El Salvador. Rich, what can the police do about this growing threat to the safety of the citizens of Montgomery County?
Well, it's a big problem, Casey, and it's a tough one to get for any local police agency to get their hands around because it's an international situation. You've got a group of these gangs that really, in many cases, coerce and press these youth into membership in the gang through threats of violence. So I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing, but it starts by at least acknowledging that this is a problem. I think it's been a problem for a long time in this county. I think we've been a little bit slow to raise this up the flagpole and recognize it as a problem. But you've got problems in the prison system with gang affiliation and behavior being coddled, and in some cases through corruption of prison officials helped and abetted. You've got all kinds of problems with police being in these neighborhoods and building the kind of relationships to keep the community from turning to violence and drugs in the first place. And you've got a big responsibility on parents, on neighbors, on churches, on social organizations throughout our community to really give kids better options and divert them before they get in. The problem with these gangs are once they get their hooks in you, it's very tough to get the
But
kids
isn't
out.
that isn't but
And then
but
they end up in the
isn't it
criminal justice system,
concerning?
and that's it.
I mean, you mentioned the fact that our social system of support is lacking. But isn't it disconcerting the fact that Montgomery County has brought so many of these youths into the county, into our neighborhoods, and we're not providing the adequate support for them, and we really don't acknowledge that we are overwhelmed by this problem and can no longer accept illegal immigrants and others being located in Montgomery
Casey,
County.
I have not seen studies that show most of the crime in this region or in Baltimore or any of the other communities that have violent crime, and we're blessed to have less than most communities here in Montgomery County, but I have yet to see studies showing that most of these crimes are being committed by immigrants. In fact, the evidence is the opposite. It's not.
But what you have-
Most
I don't know
immigrants who
where
come
you
here,
got that
the
statistic.
vast majority of immigrants here are
I want to go
law-abiding
to
citizens.
Elbridge on this,
So
because
it's wrong to scapegoat that whole community.
Elbridge.
Well, there's two things. Number one, we're demanding a hell of a lot on our police that we're not getting them the support and getting the rest of the community involved in that. I think Casa de Maryland and other agencies need to step in and have a concerted effort with the religious community, faith community, and helping work with these youth initially. You join a gang because you feel they're your family.
But we also need to crack down on the
right.
gangs
There
in
are
a big way.
There are other opportunities that these youth should have besides believing that their only choice
But
they have is a gang.
isn't it a myth that when we accept these individuals into our community, that they're going to be supported by a family environment? I mean, isn't that part of the reason that they're being relocated here, is that there's a family member or some support system here? And that's just a myth. It doesn't really exist.
And we
Casey, you have leapt upon the obvious. Of course it's a myth. Why are we bringing these people into the country? It's a Democratic administration that's encouraging them to come, letting them come, and then locally to bring them here.
But
They
what's the
shouldn't be
solution
here.
for Montgomery County, Jerry?
It's unconscionable to bring in unaccompanied youth into this country. When they come to the border, they should be turned around immediately and sent back, and then they would know not to come here.
But the problem is
anymore
already
would come
here, Jerry, and you're not answering the question.
And that is actually, I mean, Jerry's point is there are figures of the number of unaccompanied minors who came to Montgomery County. A minority were able to get linked up with parents, and those are the weak
The ones
bonds.
who are left out of the system are
Correct.
easy pickings for these
Why
gang
is it our
people.
job to take illegal aliens into this country
don't know,
and put
something
stress
about-
on our
Wait a minute,
system
but-
and expense
Wait,
on it?
Jerry,
Something about
you're
preventing them from
talking
getting
about
I'm
murdered.
talking about the
Maybe
core of the
something
problem where
like
the
that.
problem starts.
All right, but the core of the problem may start there, but the problem exists in our community, and how are we going to address it?
Stop bringing them in and causing more of the
Wait a
problem.
minute. No,
Jerry.
Jerry, number one, they're here.
We
And
gotta-
number
we
two,
gotta go to
this
break.
country was founded on bringing.
On legal immigration, not illegal immigration.
These were
Well, you
these
work-
kids were
you
legally
work-
brought here.
Yeah, you work with
No,
what you
no,
have.
no.
You
Well-
work with what you have.
You all
And
are
we're
in
not
fantasy
allowed to-
world.
Yeah.
You're in fantasy world. You're scapegoating and you're simplifying things that are not simple.
There is a simple
okay?
solution. If
What's
they
your
weren't
s-
let into the country in the first place,
Okay, but they're
you
here,
wouldn't have
Jerry.
the problem.
They're here,
so-
Stop
so you're
bringing
not
them
solving
in
the problem.
first.
Jerry,
So
this
there's
is
your-
one.
Turn the spigot
Jerry,
off.
we
The water's
agree
on the
with
floor,
you
Jerry. How
that
we
we
gonna get it
shouldn't
up?
have illegal immigration.
They're good. Then
But-
send them back home.
But the problem is, they're in our communities now. How do we address the issue?
Send them back home.
All right,
But we
I want to
have
go
a-
to the last topic. I'm sorry. This is an important topic because there's an epidemic of heroin use in Montgomery, in the state of Maryland. We have to talk about this. In 2014, during his campaign for governor, Larry Hogan targeted the growing use of heroin as a problem that the state must confront. Now, 2 years later, there's growing evidence that heroin use is on the rise, and it's caused by doctors overprescribing pain medications, which are then being replaced by a cheap and easy substitute like heroin once their prescription or insurance money dries up. The nation's drug laws have always sparked controversy, particularly the use of marijuana, which has been described as a gateway drug. So it seems ironic that there is an effort to prescribe medical marijuana as a solution to the heroin epidemic, just as the state is preparing to issue the first license to grow medical marijuana. Mark, how big a problem is heroin abuse in the state, and is it related to the overprescription of opiates like Vicodin, OxyContin, and the rest?
It is a huge problem, and it is a problem that transcends many, many communities. It is in all parts of the county, and it is a serious issue. One of the challenges is it's fascinating that you talked about the early stages of the overprescription. One of the most effective remedies to address addiction is a drug called Vivitrol. It's a shot that could take once a month. You know how much it costs a month? $1,100.
Jerry, there's a push by advocates in support of using cannabis as a treatment for the abuse of opiates and illegal narcotics, such as heroin. Even though there is very little research showing that marijuana works as such a treatment for addictions. But are lawmakers likely to fix on this as an easy way of solving the epidemic?
It's the craziest thing I ever heard. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that using any kind of drugs, if you're addicted to one, using any other kind of drug after that is a complete mistake and will inhibit your ability to get sober. It is a huge mistake. And 80 to 90% of the people that are addicted to heroin have tried another drug first. Well, what do you think that was? Chiclets? Chewing gum? Chocolate ice cream? No, it was marijuana. So what they're talking about in this state
And alcohol.
and this
And
medical
alcohol.
and this medical marijuana thing is a big sham. 90% of it is used for people to use, not medical. It's completely abused, and they're talking about in this state to make marijuana more accessible, and to even younger people. It's going to lead to all kinds of problems in heroin addiction.
Rich.
It's completely backwards.
At the risk of agreeing with Jerry and Mark, I'm going to completely agree with Jerry and Mark. I think this is a joke. When you look at the states that have done medical marijuana, oh, I have a headache, so you get a prescription for marijuana. You know, I grew up with a lot of kids who did a lot of drugs in a very poor community, and none of them escaped anything by drifting into marijuana or some of the other drugs they got into. And a lot of them went the route Jerry described, getting into marijuana first and then harder drugs and harder drugs and harder drugs. I am mystified that somebody thinks giving someone cannabis is going to get them off heroin. I think that is ridiculous, and I hope we're not silly enough to fall for that. But I think there's a whole industry trying to get their hooks into Maryland kids and increase the market of pot sold here.
Do you know how
medical
many,
marijuana
do you know how
is
many
a
people
big foot in the
applied
door.
for licenses?
I know.
Over
It's a big mistake.
1,000 people applied
It's disgusting.
It is a
for
big mistake
the
to open
ability
that
to
door.
grow medical marijuana.
And the net result is
It's
to be
gonna
more
be a
kids
huge
experimenting
business.
with it and everyone
Elbridge,
having access to
how
it.
troubled are you by this?
Not at all. As late as this week, Monday or Tuesday, if correct, University of Georgia put a study out, an extensive study that showed that in fact the use of medical marijuana has deterred people from going to the opiate type drugs. It is in fact when you have, first of all, medical marijuana and the opiate type drugs are two different ball games. They're not even connected. The reason they were connected is because, in fact, you put them in an illegal category, and so when people who associate with illegal behavior went from one illegal behavior,
it's
We
the
got to
addictive
wrap this up. So
the
let
fact is that
Elbridge
they were-
finish.
In the 20s, they were doing the same thing when you banned alcohol. So the problem is that the medical marijuana and the opiate drugs are totally unrelated, and in fact, this country and these citizens need to recognize that and move on curing those that have that addiction.
Well, as I said in the lead up on the read through, drug laws create controversy, and this movement to legalize marijuana, whether it's for medical purposes or not, is one that we have to address. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break. And now with parting shots, Jerry Cave.
The theater of operations that determines the victor in presidential politics is television, broadcasting. The Democratic Party has one of the worst people ever for television, and that's Hillary Clinton. She is so bad she has not even had a press conference all year long. On the other hand, the Republicans have done something they rarely do. They not only have one, but they have two candidates running for president and vice president that are very skilled at broadcasting. Donald Trump has a bucket of experience in television, and he has displayed it throughout this campaign. And he has now selected Mike Pence, who is a former radio host. We have two great communicators who are compatible on the issues and complement each other on their skills they bring to the table. That's why the Republicans will win this year.
Thank you, Jerry. Rich Parsons, your parting shot.
Well, I hope they'll both be playing a lot of golf in January, because I think that's what they'll be doing. But I wanted to talk about what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. The two-party conventions are going to be going on in Cleveland and in Philadelphia. And I'm concerned about the climate we're in, and I just want to appeal to people in both parties right now to remember what's important and what's not. And what's important is that we're all Americans, and we used to be able to agree to disagree and still get along and solve problems together that this country needed to solve. I worry every day that we're losing that capacity. I'm dealing with government and Congress lately. That certainly doesn't help my fears any. But what I'm really seeing on the campaign trail with the violence and the demonstrations and some of the extreme rhetoric that is dividing us even more than usual is a great cause of concern. And I'd like to just direct people as my parting shot. There's a civility pledge that came out a few weeks ago from several leaders in the transpartisan movement that people should just look at and read and think about as we go into this very vitriolic and divisive election system. And just remember, we're all Americans.
Thank you, Rich. Elbridge James, your parting shot.
My parting shot, unfortunately, is that bad things happen to good people. The police officers in Dallas did a great job. They were community policing, and in fact, they've deterred a lot of violence in that city and had a handle on crime and good policing techniques. Unfortunately, bad things do happen, and my prayers go out to them.
Thank you, Elbridge. Mark, for your parting shot.
My prayer is that next week we had this show, we had Dallas, we've had Orlando, we've had the incident in France. My hope is that next week we don't have anything like that.
Amen.
And next week, there are going to be two important community events that people should take recognition of between the police and the community, one in Silver Spring and one in Germantown, dealing with police relations. They're very important, and we're going to report on them next week. I want to thank the panel for being here. This was a lively and engaging debate, and as Rich commented, at least we are doing it in a civil and respectful manner. So thank you, panel, for being here. Thank you, audience, for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.